California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, coming to you from the state's capital, Sacramento. We are joined by Lorena Gonzalez, member of the California State Assembly. And Ms. Gonzalez, how's your new job? You won a special election, was it in June?
Late May, May 28th, right. I was sworn in fact.
Right, and I interviewed you on your first day, which was exciting for me. I'm sure exciting for you as well.
Yes,
How's your new job?
Minutes before I was sworn in fact, I was here doing an interview. Well, you know, that first week was crazy because it was the end of session deadline. And so I got to see hundreds of bills. It was a bit much. And then we went right into the budget. And then after that, it slowed down. We had a break. And so I kind of got my bearings together, you know, finally got to staff up a little bit. But it's been fun. It's everything I imagined and more.
That's terrific. Your first bill, is it your first bill on immigration services, AB 1159?
It is.
So tell us about your concerns as it relates to the future of immigration reform. There's a lot of excitement, trepidation surrounding it, but you want to get Californians prepared.
I do, and I want to make sure that there's some consumer protections, basically. You know, it's unusual to start a bill this late in the session. We had to do some gymnastics, to say the least, to get it through, even to get it started. But the reason it was so important, it's an urgent bill, because what's happening right now is we have, unfortunately, just, you know, not all of the immigration attorneys and consultants out there are bad folks, but there are some who are really taking advantage of the fact that these immigrants, 2.5 to 3 million immigrants who want to become legalized residents, know that immigration reform may be happening at the national level. So what they're doing is they're advertising and saying, hey, come in, get your papers together, we'll help you get your papers together, and you can be first in line. And they're charging people for this.
But that's not necessarily the case.
You know,
we don't even know what's going to pass. I mean, as we speak today, I'm a little skeptical.
I am as well. And, you know, it's unfortunate. I want to hope that it passes. But even if it does, we don't know what it'll look like. We don't know who will qualify for any kind of legalized services. So at this point, it's completely hypothetical. And what we want to do is stop the practice of taking money for something so prospectively hypothetical.
What's interesting is there's a term that we often see as we drive through various California neighborhoods, notario. And to me, I speak some Spanish, I just presume that means notary.
Right.
But it means something a little different in Mexico.
Well, if you go through some of these neighborhoods, you'd wonder why we need so many notary publics in Latino neighborhoods. But in actuality, what happens is in Mexico, a notario is somebody who's a licensed legal service provider.
Almost like a paralegal, you said?
Almost like a paralegal. It's not quite an attorney. It's not an abogado, but you know, it still means something. And so what they do, unfortunately, a lot of people do on this side of the border, is they go and get their notary public license, which of course means very little to nothing as far as qualifications, and they advertise that way. So this bill also ensures that if they have the word notario up, they have to clearly state in Spanish that they are not a licensed legal provider, so that there's no confusion, that they're simply a notary public.
I want to speak with you about your constituents. I believe that your district hugs the Mexican border.
Yes.
And so you mentioned there's a lot of excitement surrounding immigration reform. But what are they saying to you? Are they understanding the complexities of the process? Are they preparing? I mean, aside from being snookered, but are they preparing for the possibilities?
Well, I think it just depends. A lot of them, a lot of folks who hope to fall into that category of somebody who could be legalized, had kids who just became residents basically through the DACA process, through deferred action.
Dreamers.
And so the dreamers, And so they kind of watched their kids go through this process, knew that they had to get all this paperwork together. And I think there's a realization that, you know, and to be honest, the media has done a very good job of saying, hey, start making sure you have that visa if you entered on a visa originally and it expired. Make sure you have your work records, your school records.
When we come back, I want to talk more about the Dreamers, okay? Our guest is Lorena Gonzalez, member of the California State Assembly. For our viewers on HLN, thank you so much for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. Assemblywoman, I want to talk about the Dreamers because I'm very interested in the process by which they can adopt affirmative deferred action.
Right.
I would have thought that once the word got out that if you're a Dreamer, you can go through deferred action, there would be a flood of folks trying to apply for that process. But the statistics suggest it's not happening. Are you hearing the same thing, seeing the same thing?
Well, you know, that first month it was crazy. I mean, the numbers, and everybody kind of prepped up. School districts hired people to help. In fact, in San Diego, there was a special position created just to help people get the paperwork that they needed. Yeah, because there was just, everybody was very excited about it. And then it died down. And some of the reasons I think are, number one, the cost. It's still costly. So, in fact, we were trying to help a young lady in San Diego who was valedictorian of her school, heading off to college, homeless, and undocumented. And so to get the money together in order to ensure that she could qualify.
How much does it cost?
So, and it just ranges depending on whether they qualify for some kind of assistance or not. But it's still costly. And if you have one of those cases that's not completely clear or you need legal help, you're going to pay thousands on top of that. So it's, I think we were looking for about $600 for her, and she was in a special circumstance and would need we got her some free legal assistance as well. But those are the kind of situations where obviously it's something you're going to do if you want to become legalized, but that's still a lot of money, cash on hand for people, to apply.
Even aside from the financial challenges, and I believe them to be real, it does seem as if the numbers are much lower than anticipated. Is it cultural? Is it that they're fearful of just even interacting with the government? What is it?
Well, there was a lot of questions early on as well about whether people would fall into this category. And so some of the fear was if they applied and they did not qualify, that then they'd be on some kind of target list for somebody who's here.
Is that the case? Do we know?
I don't think the government is trying to go out and target folks who applied and weren't qualified, but it's a very real concern. And I know that a lot of people were waiting through kind of the election cycle and to see how that happened as well, to see, is this something that I have to worry about with a new president per se? Because this was never passed by Congress.
That's true.
This is an executive order. So, things can change quickly. This president, despite some of the great things he's done, hasn't been great about deportations, and so
highest deportation rate in the history of our republic. I mean, I believe that in his first term, the deportations were greater than his predecessor's 2 terms.
Right. So there were kids who thought they don't want to shine a light upon their parents. They didn't want, somehow for their parents to be put on some kind of list or be clear that, they were living with their parents here, or their parents brought them here. That was the whole notion, right? Beyond their control. So I think there's a lot of fear still out there, and it's not irrational fear, right?
But is it irrational to the extent that once someone disabuses them of the notion that you will be targeted, your parents will be targeted, that they then don't step forward?
Well, it's how do you do that, though? And I just saw that actually the president has now made some comments about stopping the deportation of dreamer parents. And and that just happened. I think I read that yesterday, if not this morning. And so hopefully if that word gets out, I think that you'll have some more young people who step up. And, it's not just students, a little bit older than that as well, who step up and say, okay, now I feel comfortable,
How do you feel about relations on the border as we speak today? Because I personally live in Los Angeles, and we get these media reports about the border just being lawless on both sides. I'm feeling it's probably hyperbolic. And I want to get a sense from you, how are border relations?
They're actually very, very good. And there are, thousands and thousands of people that cross back and forth between Mexico and California every day. Our economy depends on it. One of the biggest problems we have is the wait times at the border crossings. We're trying hard to put together some kind of federal, state, local package that would open up additional border crossings, because it's really not good for the economy or the environment to have people idling in their cars for 4 or 5 hours trying to get back and forth. Safety-wise, I think that has been really exaggerated. I know some people are still afraid to go to Tijuana, but it's become much safer. This side of the border, it's absolutely, you wouldn't even know if you were, less than a mile from a border. In fact, I'm just thinking, I went to a clinic the other day down in my district in San Ysidro. It's right there next to the border crossing, and there's nothing unsafe about it. It's completely,
I want to thank you so much for joining us. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Senator Ben Hueso. He is looking to have a bill passed that will improve the wait times at the border. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on California Edition.
How many individuals living in the United States are foreign born? 30, 40, 50, or 60 million. In 2011, 40.4 million foreign-born people resided in the United States.
Welcome back to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Ben Hueso. He is a member of the California State Senate. And I want to speak with you about our border. There's no doubt there's a lot of fear surrounding our border, but at the same time, there's a lot of economic activity at our border, and you want to increase that economic activity.
And we have 4 borders, just
Yes.
to be clear: Oregon,
Please.
Nevada, Arizona, and
Okay,
Mexico. I
well
assume you're
stated.
talking about Mexico.
Very well stated, touche.
Because, of course, my district borders Arizona and Mexico, and I've been working a lot to reduce border wait times because of the benefit to the economy.
Let's be very specific, because I think for folks that don't travel to our southern border, they don't really have a sense of what happens as you're trying to re-enter the country. Give us a sense of how bad it can get.
Well, we have, in California's border with Mexico has 4 ports of entry. One of them, the San Isidro port of entry, is the busiest border crossing in the world.
That's the Tijuana.
Yes, it's called San Isidro. There are 2 with that border Tijuana. So the San Isidro port of entry is the busiest border crossing in the world. So you have a lot of people using that border crossing to travel internationally.
And as I understand it, 50,000 vehicles travel every day through that border, 25,000 pedestrians.
Yes.
That's a huge number of people to move between a fortified entrance.
So who are we talking about crossing the border? A lot of people from Mexico come into California to do their shopping. So they bring a lot of economic benefit to our state.
And they come in legally.
And they come in legally. And there are a lot of people from interior of Mexico that also come in to visit Tijuana, but as part of their trip, they also want to visit San Diego. So they also bring some spending power into our state. Because it's such a busy border crossing, of course, for security purposes, there's a lot of security personnel at the border, but not enough to handle the deluge of people that want to come in every day. And that what becomes the problem, that at any given day, you can have about 2 hours of a wait time, sometimes 3 hours at the busiest points.
And as I understand it, it's not just visitors. Tourism obviously is important. We know Baja California brings in a lot of tourism to San Diego, but it could also be people who are working
Yes.
legally. And there's also the pure import-export side between our border. Mexico continues to be one of our largest trading partners, if not the largest, I understand.
We have people in Mexico that work in California, but we also have Californians who retire in Mexico.
Right.
And come back into California because they can't afford the housing in California. But we also have people in California that work in Mexico.
Right. It's undeniable.
So you have almost every possible scenario of circumstances that people live in every day, and crossing the border becomes important to their business, to their quality of life.
And you're looking to ease that crossing. I understand the states of Washington, New York, Michigan, and Vermont have adopted what's known as an enhanced driver's license. You want to bring that system to our state.
Yes, it is a process that's authorized by the federal government, in which states can now give a state driver's license that has RFID technology.
Which means?
It means that it has a radio frequency that when the card is removed from a protective sheath that prevents the emission from transponding, when it's removed, it sends a signal to technology that already exists at the border that communicates with the sentry, so that they know who you are before you even arrive at the sentry post.
Can you drive right through, or is there still a stop?
There is still a stop. They're required to sometimes investigate the vehicle and to look at.
I want to hear more about that when we come back. For our viewers on HLN, thanks for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back with Senator Ben Hueso. So, Senator, as they show up at the border and they have this EDL, Enhanced Driver's License, we don't have it yet, but what would happen?
So they would, you would use it to communicate with a technology that picks up the signal, sends it to the sentry while you're waiting in line with your vehicle. It also works in the pedestrian line as well. So whether you're a pedestrian or a driver, simply showing this RFID technology identification card can help you reduce border wait times by facilitating the transmission of information to the Sentry Guard.
Would there be special lanes that you can drive through if you have an EDL?
Yes.
Okay.
There will be, they're called Smart Ready lanes.
Okay.
And they're already in existence. The new improvements they've made in the border include this technology. So for California as a state not to take advantage of a big investment the federal government has made for us to help reduce border wait times would be a shame.
So where do we stand on this?
Well, the bill is currently in Assembly Appropriations awaiting approval, but should it be approved at Appropriations, it would go to the Assembly floor and directly to the governor's office for his signature.
It's passed out of the Senate.
It's passed out of the Senate.
Okay.
It's passed Assembly Judiciary.
And how are you feeling about it?
I'm feeling very confident. I think this is our year. I think it would have a huge impact on our economy. I think this is a year where as a legislature we're working to help rebuild California's economy, keep it rebounding, keep it moving in a positive direction in terms of recovery. And this bill could be extremely helpful. Reducing border wait times by 30% could mean up to $2 billion benefit to the California economy.
I want to talk about another economic driver, especially in San Diego, and that's our veterans. We know that our veterans are a huge asset to our nation. At the same time, though, the veterans that may be coming home from the Gulf War face a variety of challenges. We want to help them get back on their feet, but it appears that there may be some bureaucracy that is preventing veterans from taking that next step. Could you explain to us what you're looking to do as it relates to what's known as the Employment and Training Program?
Yes,
Please.
and currently we have a program, CalFresh, that provides food to California's most underserved population, people that are very poor, that don't even have enough to eat. We provide them with just a small amount of food. We could do more to help them, but that's a program that we have to help the poor in our state. We have a lot of veterans that are also undernourished, that don't have access to quality foods, and it's a shame that the people that have sacrificed so much for our country's safety should be in a position of homelessness and in poverty. And I have a bill that would make the CalFresh program accessible to them.
Right, because as I understand it right now, in order to qualify for the CalFresh program, there often may be a requirement that the individual participate in an employment and training program, which intuitively seems like a wise move, but these programs may not be appropriate for a veteran.
The reason they may not be appropriate for a veteran is because they may already have access to that kind of program through VA services. Right. So we're putting them through a double program, and that may not be the reason why they're underemployed or unemployed. So getting them to access veteran services is, number one, very important, because it includes employment training, it includes access to jobs, it includes health care benefits, housing benefits. So if we could just get them in front of a community service officer that gives them this kind of access to benefits, that would be a great start in helping their life. Because we are doing a lot for veterans in our country and our state, but a lot of them aren't aware, oftentimes, that number one, they qualify, and number two, that these programs even exist.
And so this bill would refer those veterans seeking assistance for nutritional purposes to the Veterans Office, and not necessarily divert them into an employment training program that just is inapplicable for their skill set.
Yes, and that program is managed by what we call CVSOs, the people that are kind of on the cutting edge of bringing this information to them. What we did this year, this bill would enhance. What we also did was to fund that program so that the CVSOs could provide greater outreach. We're not reaching enough veterans, so they have federal dollars waiting for them to help their quality of life, and they're not getting access to them. If a small investment into helping CVSOs will help us bring these federal dollars into the California economy, which will help our economy as well.
His name has been Hueso. He's a member of the California State Senate. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Steve Fox, a member of the Assembly. He'll also be speaking about helping veterans. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's California Edition.
How many veterans have served in the military since the 9/11 terrorist attacks? 1.9, 2.8, 3.3 or 4.1 million. Since the 2001 terrorist attacks, about 2.8 million veterans have served in the U.S. military.
It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance coming to you from Sacramento. We are joined by Steve Fox. He's a member of the California State Assembly. And boy, I love your election story. You found out less than 24 hours before swearing in that you had won an election that was held, a month before.
That's correct. I was 2 weeks before swearing in. You know, the election's in November, swearing-in's in December. 2 weeks before swearing in, I was 3,407 votes behind.
That's a significant margin.
Almost no way to win. You get one vote, they get one vote, you don't move ahead.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, they found the 13,000 or so provisional votes. You know, the people that are on their way to work,
Right.
don't know what ballot box they're at,
Right.
not at the right poll. Those are my people.
Those are your people,
I don't know where they are, but those are my people.
Right, clearly.
When they started counting those votes, what they found was 70% went to me. And so little bit by little bit, within 2 weeks, I started moving ahead. All of a sudden, it was 1,900.
Were you aware of this?
I was aware of the slight change, but nobody knew how many provisional votes were out there because they were mixed in with everything else. And then literally the day before swearing in on Sunday, less than 24 hours, in fact, it was about 22 hours before swearing in, I flipped up by 145 votes ahead.
Who called you to say, get up here, you're going to be sworn in as the next assembly member?
The speaker, John Perez, called me on my cell phone and said, congratulations, you've won, which was hard to believe. And he said, fly up. So my wife and I and my son flew up, and they had a car waiting for us, took us to where the Democrats were having their caucus, and we got a standing ovation.
Of course you did. Of course you did.
Now, my opponent had already got the training, so I missed the training.
Oh, my.
He already hired his staff. He rented his house. He had food ordered there and had his name put on the door.
Oh, my. So things happen, and
quickly.
It's just the result of an election. How's it been over the last year or so? I mean, not quite a year, but how have you enjoyed your new job?
It's been great, I have to say. I finally got to do a lot of things I've always wanted to do.
Right.
I've run for a lot of offices in the past, and finally I was in a position to do everything you've been talking about. Now it's time to put up or shut up.
And let's talk about one of your main priorities, and that's protecting veterans.
My father was a World War II vet, and as I grew up, he had pictures of the concentration camps. And I grew up with stories, and
Did he help to liberate the concentration camps?
He was a technical sergeant, which means pictures under fire, and the answer is yes to your question. So what I decided to do is, how can I help vets? 44% of the vets in our country are in California. Right. A lot are homeless. A lot of them are not getting the medical attention they deserve. And I decided this is what I'm going to. One of the things is my priority is, how do I help the veterans of our state? They fought for us. Many of them died. They deserve, those that are coming back deserve a hand up. They deserve to be put back in the position they would have been but for everything they've given.
Now,
we owe them that.
What's interesting is we know that unemployment amongst veterans had been soaring during the recent recession. The recent data suggests that maybe veterans are starting to catch up in terms of joblessness. But that being said, you still want to make sure that here in California, there are efforts made to help veterans obtain appropriate employment.
You know, one veteran unemployed is one too many. The speaker and I together authored a bill to take $600 million and put into veteran bonds to purchase new houses,
right,
to help them reacclimate to society. If they need drug counseling, whatever they need, we've established that, and we were able to get it through the Assembly, and now it's gone over to the Senate side.
And so we'll see. So that would be a bond on the November 2014 ballot.
No, we took an existing bond that wasn't being used.
Oh, I see.
And we converted it. So it doesn't even have to be voted on by the public. It's already there.
Okay.
It's money that wasn't being used, and now it's going to be used for veterans.
When we come back, I want to talk more about veterans and obtaining jobs, because I know that's one of your priorities. We're speaking with Steve Fox. For our viewers on HLN, we thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. So, Mr. Fox, I want to go back to joblessness and the challenges that all Americans face, but including veterans. There are some employers that often may be nervous about hiring veterans. They may be concerned about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. For whatever reason, you're looking to create an actual workforce development and employment office for veterans.
We've done that, but what we've also done is we passed the California Enterprise Zone.
Yes, and let's talk about that for sure.
Now, the enterprise zone in my district had lapsed. There were 42 enterprise zones, and we didn't have one anymore. It's a tax deduction mechanism to get businesses to hire people. So what happened was it went over to the Senate side, and unfortunately, due to politics, it had been our area had been cut out of the enterprise zone.
And your area is the Antelope Valley, is
The
that correct?
Antelope, that's correct, and Kern and those areas. So what had happened was I got called from I was having a root canal.
Oh my!
My chief of
Were
staff.
you on the floor of the assembly when that was happening?
No, I was at the dentist, and the Senate was dealing with the bill. My chief of staff picked me up at the dentist, took me over there, and I lobbied till 11:30 at night that day at the Senate chambers to get the bill, our area, back into the enterprise zone. I was successful.
But
And then it went over to the assembly side. We had to get bipartisan support, which we did. And then because I was such a nudge and so pushy, they allowed me to be in on the signing of the enterprise zone with the governor. And the assembly had me give the radio broadcast all about the enterprise zone. And let me tell you about it.
please.
If an employer wants to hire somebody as of July of next year, they can get a tax deduction. That person makes between $10 and $28. If it's more, the tax deduction is still in that zone. The first year they'll get half off as for their tax deduction, their tax credit. The second year a little bit less, and so on. So it's a long-term effect. But what happens is they want people that are unemployed to get it, but they're putting veterans immediately who apply to get a job will be ahead of everybody else getting those jobs with the enterprise zone.
But as I understand it, the geographic boundary element of enterprise zones really is not as critical. Is that true under the new regime?
Well, it is, but I think they're also looking at where the employers live in certain areas that are, say, like the bottom 25% of the economics. But if someone needs a job, they're definitely at the bottom of the economics. Mm-hmm. So this is a way to give tax credits and an incentive for employers to now start hiring. Now, the enterprise zone did some other good things too while we were at it. One of the things did is if a manufacturer sells up to $200 million worth of goods outside of California, it won't be taxed. So now we are in a fighting chance against other industries trying to sell stuff to other states. The third component of the enterprise zone is we gave the governor permission to make his own tax package to bring business to California. California is going to become one of the business-friendly areas in the country. We're going to bring jobs here, we're going to bring business here, and we're going to help veterans while we're doing it.
At the same time, there are folks who believe that the new enterprise zone regime is a shell of the former regime. How would you respond to those?
It's different. The old enterprise zone had some holes in it. You could let somebody go and hire somebody new and get the tax credit. This bill won't allow you to do that. It plugs the holes in it. It makes it more viable. It's an addition to employee, not in lieu of an employee. So it gives more of an incentive to keep the current employees and hire new ones.
What about redevelopment? Because that was a sibling of enterprise zones. As you know, redevelopment was completely eliminated.
The redevelopment money was given to each city to help business and build. Now, let me tell you that while the governor did a clawback and took back all that money, I found that one of my communities, one of my cities, had $2.7 million where they had started to build some apartments and housing, and the governor took back the money.
Right.
So after 5 times of asking the governor, they came to my office, and my office, we literally got Speaker Perez and Senator Pro Tem Steinberg involved, and we lobbied the governor, and he reversed his decision.
So, which is good news, no doubt, for that community.
$2.7 million to build 1,000 houses.
But instead of having to fight the clawback, could it be that we, the Assembly, the Senate, should consider a new redevelopment regime? Because when redevelopment was eliminated, before you were in the legislature, there was discussion about creating a new day for redevelopment, but there's been no discussion since.
I think there's been discussion. It's just a question of where the priorities are. I favor redevelopment. It's one of the questions I asked. One of my big pushes was education jobs. We were able to give $700 million for K through 3rd grade to encourage schools to have approximately 24 students in the K through 3rd grade to lower the amount of students. We also gave $300 million more to the junior colleges to hire more teachers.
But are they mutually exclusive?
No, I don't think so. Our first goal was we have to reinstate what we can. So the first year we've had money, so we used it wisely. We put $1 billion aside for a rainy day fund. So we're being very conservative with the budget.
Okay, his name is Steve Fox, member of the California Assembly. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition.